Hey, how you doing, Chris? Look at Chris. Look at the big smile on his face. You know
Yeah.
why he's smiling so big? Because it's tax day, April 15th. Everybody know it is tax day. But we're going to talk about something, and I hope everybody's got their taxes in on time, or you filed your extensions and you did all the things you need to do as a part of our commitment to our community. Now,
Yes.
today we're going to talk about something that a lot of people probably don't understand, and that is what I call the petrodollar, right?
Mhm.
Big oil, and why that matters. Because for generations, much of the world's oil has been bought and sold in US dollars, which has given us a very good standing when it comes to value, when it comes to financial system. But here's the big question: is the petrodollar system still as powerful as it once was? I'm going to leave that with Chris as we begin. You like to introduce yourself, Chris?
Yeah, Grant, good to see you and happy to be here. And yeah, I'm happy and excited because this is a juicy topic, right?
This is big. It's big. Things I did not know that back in the 1970s, there were some accords. A lot of people knew about the oil embargo. But did you really unpack what was really happening as the U.S. standing in the world economic stage was cemented at that time with the petrodollar? First, Chris, explain to people what is the petrodollar?
Well, great. Before we go into this whole thing, I think some background is necessary.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love giving the history, right? So let's back up a little bit and give some of the history because I think there's some misconceptions.
yeah.
I think the media itself doesn't really understand properly what's happened over the decades. And we got to first shoot way back to World War II, the end of World War
Oh,
II.
wow. We go way
After
back to
World
World
War
War
II,
II. Okay.
right, there was an agreement called the Bretton Woods Agreement. And basically, what that agreement did, it did a lot of things. It talked about a lot of the rebuilding of the financial system after World War II. And it did, to put it in short terms, is it made the US dollar the primary global currency, which it is
Mm.
still today. Okay.
Mhm.
And and look, that was in exchange for a lot of US help to rebuild Europe and all these kind of things. That was kind of the thing that went on and was very successful and still has been a very successful approach to rebuilding the financial system that was in a little bit of disarray, as you'd imagine, after World War II, right?
Right, right.
Okay, so then we fast forward a little bit, and that system allowed the U.S. dollar to be the primary currency for global trade, and as we know, even today, it is still the primary currency for global trade. But you want to talk about petrodollars, you want to talk about the oil, you want to
Yeah.
talk about the most traded commodity in the world, which is oil, and the highest value traded commodity in the world, which is still oil, right? So
Interesting.
let's go a little forward. 1973. Now, unfortunately, I remember 1973. We had the first oil crisis, right? This
Yeah.
never happened in America before, right? All of a sudden, we had lines. The gas stations were closed. There was no gas. And it may sound funny now, but the price of oil went from, ready, $3 a barrel up to $12 a barrel.
Wow. Remember those days, the good old days.
Yeah, well, I actually had a part-time job pumping gas, and gas at that time was 29, 30 cents a gallon. Yeah, yep. That
I
was
do remember that. Walking up to the corner store, and it was just two digits. It was 0.30 or 0.29, and now what is it? It's 4.29.
well, and by the way, it's still cheap. People don't understand that. Go over to Europe, and they're paying double that.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's unbelievable. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so we take a lot of things for granted, and yeah, no one wants to see prices go up. I mean, especially me, right? I don't want to pay more for anything, but we do have this big advantage over a lot of other places in terms of the price that we pay at the pump.
Mm,
Okay, so now we're in 1973.
right.
Oil crisis, prices jump up. The critical part really was supply, right? So in 1974, there wasn't a formal agreement, right? There was more of what I would call a strategic arrangement that started between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, at the time the major producer of oil, right? And what this arrangement, right? Because it's not like a treaty. It's never been formalized like you would expect, and like a lot of times the media will misinform us that there is some agreement. There isn't. Okay, there's no treaty signed. There's no anything going on like that. But what this did say, what this arrangement did say, is it said that Saudi and the U.S. agree that all oil will be priced in U.S. dollars. Number one, right? It also guaranteed the supply, right? And in return, the U.S. sold military equipment to Saudi Arabia and provided defense for the regime. In other words, the king of Saudi Arabia wanted to make sure that his family will be the kings and the kings and the kings, okay? So very good agreement for both sides. And what's interesting is that very quickly after this arrangement was shaped, OPEC, which is the oil producing nations agreement, all agreed to this. Now, over the years, yes, oil has been priced in US dollars, and that's what we call petrodollars, because the other side of this arrangement is that excess funds that these nations of OPEC have, and Saudi was again started this, would be invested into US treasury bonds. So you see how the circle works.
Big circle. Yeah.
Right. Now, this not only gave the U.S. a big advantage in being the sole currency for the most expensive and most traded commodity in the world, oil, this also funded the U.S. government with a continuous supply of people buying treasury bonds, or countries, I should say, buying treasury bonds, right? So this gave the U.S. a very unique advantage over everyone.
Yeah. And that was 50 years ago. We're not talking about, this is 50 years ago. This is like what, during Watergate or right after Watergate? Was this it was during the Gerald Ford administration?
Yeah, Watergate was 1972.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't think Gerald Ford gets credit because that was a huge.
Again, keep in mind that the model for this was what happened after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was a formal agreement, right? That was kind of the model for it. What they did here is they just made it a strategic arrangement centered around oil.
They doubled down on that and pretty much made the U.S. as we understand it, it is the financial nerve center of the world and the military might for most, the strongest military in the world at the same time. It's ironic that we see now the U.S. at war with Iran. You start to understand some of the underpinnings of that. Because now here's a good question for you. You might know this. What is Iran's standing in OPEC and in its relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Well, look, it's historically been a member of OPEC, right? And I right now the standing with Saudi is that they don't have a great relationship. There is a relationship, I think there are. You see, you got to look back in some other things too, in my mind, anyway. Okay, so they're both Islamic countries, right? But in Islam, there's two directions that Muslims go. One is a Sunni Muslim,
right?
Sunni
Shiites.
And the Sunnis are Saudi is primarily Sunni, as most of the Gulf region is, and then there's the Shiites. Iran is Shiites, okay? And the difference goes back into who you believe after Muhammad really is the leader of the religion, and there was a split thousands of years ago. Well, not thousands, but more than 1,000 years ago.
Yeah,
there was a split, and it kind of went in two directions, right? And the two don't exactly see eye to eye. Although, of course, if it's Muslims against everyone else, they
come together.
Okay, so that's one of the things. So there's that underlining, you're not like us kind of thing between
ideological differences. But just like in the Christian world, you have Catholicism, you got the Protestant world.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, you do. And look, even in the Jewish religion, you have the Hasidics, very Orthodox, right? And you have the more traditional Jewish people, I guess,
Yeah.
Right?
No, there's divisions and all of that. But what it comes down to is that now, because you see this, I did not realize that, and I don't think a lot of Americans realize that petrodollar world, that this is what gives the U.S. such authority. I mean, they've given it. And then you start thinking like petrodollar. We've talked about stable coins and things like that, the U.S. Treasury. And then you start to see how this is cyclical and maintained. And then when there's discord or disorder, or you start to have other underpinnings trying to challenge that rule. Like right now, you've got China, Russia, Brazil, kind of like, hey, we're starting to challenge that that arrangement, as you just put it.
Grant, I wouldn't characterize it as cyclical, right? It's been pretty steady. There really hasn't. There's been cycles on the prices and prices going, but the method, the process has been very steady. Now, keep in mind again, and I'll repeat it: there is no formal agreement, right? This is an arrangement, okay, that everyone agrees to. Saudi Arabia, as OPEC, also is not explicitly required to sell only in oil, and Saudi Arabia
in dollars. Right. Yeah.
Saudi Arabia themselves have sold oil in British pounds, for instance, on occasion. Okay, but it's few and far between. Now, when you start talking about China in particular, and now you're taking some steps past the petrodollar and going into the BRIC countries and the BRIC Bank and how they're looking to and have built an economy that is not based on the U.S. dollar, right? It's small, but it's done, it works, and everything. Okay, the first formal arrangement of oil being sold in a currency other than U.S. dollars was some years ago, maybe it's 10 years ago now, when China and Russia put together an oil agreement where China would buy Russian oil and Russia would accept Chinese renminbi. Okay, and there's a similar arrangement with Brazil, and it's beyond oil. It's general products. It's interesting. Brazil exports quite a bit to China.
Yeah.
One of the big exports are chicken feet.
Really? Yeah. Interesting.
Chicken feet, and Brazil is also a major producer of chicken. Okay, so kind of makes sense, right? And that's priced in renminbi also. Now, keep in mind, China has kind of two currencies, right? Internally, domestically, the yuan, and then for international business, they use the renminbi. But they're priced the same. They're interchangeable. It's not like there are some Cuba, for instance, has two different currencies, right? And one is local currency, which has a big discrepancy in value from the international currency that the government.
This is interesting stuff. We're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back. We're gonna go deeper into in these petrodollars and how it really affects world economies and where it sits, over time. And this is important knowledge. We need to understand. I always call it the monopoly board. You got to understand these these are the key drivers. So you can get beyond the news headlines that always are sensationalizing this and this and this and that, but to truly understand the playing field, and then you get a better understanding of why certain things are happening. So we'll be right back.
I used to watch BET, MTV, VH1, now I watch Tempo. Soca, Calypso, Reggae Dancehall. Don't stall, better get tuned in to the tempo. Don't have cable, they got an app. Go to your app store, download that. Whether it's tourism, cuisine, or the social scenes, if it ain't Tempo, it's a rap. Who got the Caribbean views? Tempo. It's the latest in Caribbean news. Tempo. You tryna cook Caribbean food? Tempo. You know they got the music videos too. Tempo. Who got the Caribbean views? Tempo. It's the latest in Caribbean news. Tempo. You tryna cook Caribbean food? Tempo. You know they got the music videos too. Tempo.
Third Wall Street is a new emerging global capital markets formation and structured trifactor financial hub at the U.S. third border in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, in the Caribbean and Latin America. The new Third Wall Street is the home of the Alexander Hamilton Financial Center and named in honor of Alexander Hamilton, an American founding father, first U.S. Treasury Secretary, and architect of the U.S. financial system and modern America. Third Wall Street is located in a U.S. National Heritage Area, Opportunity Zone, and the boyhood home of Alexander Hamilton in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Island, connecting 3 financial hubs in the Americas by way of new innovative financial technology and markets: New York Wall Street South, Brickell Avenue, Miami, and Third Wall Street in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, and established the new Caribbean America's Single Economy Zone, developed by SETI Case Capital Markets. Third Wall Street will transform financial markets, improving access to capital worldwide. Visit www.thirdwallstreet.com to learn more.
All right, welcome back to the big picture. We're talking big. Everything is big when we're talking to Chris Principe, the money magnet, as I call him sometimes on this show. And I got a big question for the big picture because we got to really look at this. I want to understand this. And you might be able to answer this question. I think you can, because I want to understand, how does the petrodollar system affect interest rates, inflation, and the broader U.S. economy?
Well, Grant, I mean, I love that question, okay, because those really are kind of the key factors. But let me start off with one thing, is that for the majority of Americans, all of this system, petrodollars, OPEC, it doesn't matter. They don't really care, okay? The only one thing that matters is the price at the pump, right?
Right.
Like I said, I think the majority of Americans don't understand that we actually have the luxury of a reasonable price compared to a lot of other places for the price of gas, but still, you don't want to see any prices go up. Okay, so now the big news story right now is Iran and the conflict, right? But let me give you a little bit of background on how Iran fits into this. Okay, so number one, in 1960 is when OPEC was originally formed, right? Iran is a founding member. Okay, now as a founding member, they have the same rights and status and voting position as Saudi Arabia, for instance, right? Now, it's very interesting, though, over the years, so any new member that wants to join needs Iran's vote, for instance, right? These kind of things. But interesting over the years is while part of the process in OPEC is to set price, to set the supply, right? Quotas for the different countries and everything. Iran is exempt from quotas.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right, kind of interesting. Now that started because of the financial sanctions that were put onto Iran. So that's how Iran got that non-quota price. And of course the fact that they have no quotas doesn't make it that easy for them because the sanctions prevent them from selling in US dollars, right? So that's kind of the balance, let's say, with that. So it's really interesting that what we're seeing today with Iran still looking to ship oil. Look, they're selling oil in a lot of different currencies, including crypto.
Right. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
No, you can't be surprised. And look, they just demonstrated that by saying that, if a ship wants to go through the Strait of Hormuz, you have to pay a fine to Iran, and you pay that fine in crypto.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and look, they want to make sure nobody can get in the middle and hold their funds and freeze their funds and everything. Of course, from their
the banking system that they don't always control. I mean, international banking systems is a different story, right?
Exactly, and you're spot on with that, Grant, because that's really everything that is an issue for them, right? So now, when we start talking about how does it impact the economy here in particular, right? Of course, like anything in the supply and demand system, which is what capitalism basically is, right? Is going to be based on what's the demand and what's the price I can get for what I'm selling, and it's not always fair, is what I'll say. Okay, and that happens. I mean, just think of at Christmas time, right? At Christmas time, some new toy comes out. I don't know. I remember when I was young, Cabbage Patch dolls, right?
How old are you, Chris? No.
Couldn't find them anywhere. And all of a sudden, people were selling them, and stores even selling them for higher than the list price. Supply and demand. Okay? And that's what happens, of course, in oil. Now, on one side, that can affect our economy, because if the price of oil goes up, it affects a lot of things. People don't understand. Oil going up in price means your food prices go up. Why? Because so much food is transported, and transportation is a good cost. It's a higher than average percentage in food than it is in some other commodities. And I think what people also don't realize that the trucking costs in the U.S. are one of the lowest in the world. It's very cheap in perspective to ship goods by truck domestically from state to state in the U.S. And of course, there's no customs you go through. There's no inspection. There's no nothing. You just wave as you pass the sign saying you're entering a new state, right? So that still affects our price. So these are the things that help fuel inflation, right? So as these prices go up, the big thing: oil price, food prices, home prices. These are the big things, right?
Big inflation, it's a cyclic, talking about a domino effect, right?
Right. And that's kind of that whole thing when you start talking about inflation. But what you don't see, and what people I'm sure don't really realize and understand, is that at the same time, because oil is primarily sold in US dollars, and because those economies, those countries that have surplus funds due to the sale of oil, reinvest them back to the US in treasury bonds, it makes our financial system very strong, because there is this wall of demand for US dollars. Give you an example. I don't know, pick a country, let's say South Africa, right?
Right.
Okay, South Africa wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, fine, no problem. But what South Africa needs to do is it needs to take its South African rand, their local currency, their country currency, and needs to sell that and buy dollars with it so that it can use the dollars to pay Saudi Arabia. And that's what happens constantly all the time from many different countries, because the majority of countries import oil because they don't have it, right? And especially when we look at our, our really the region close to our heart, which is the Caribbean, these are all islands, and most of them import really almost everything. I mean, there's some island countries that import drinking water, right? So it's a big thing, the transportation cost and having to get US dollars to buy a lot of these things. Now, of course, you have countries like Trinidad, which is an oil producing nation and gas producing nation. So that's, the other side of it, right? They don't have that same issue.
This is so here's what I call the shift, or what's happening. Now you just kind of the dependency on oil, and then how we're fueling our financial systems, and we're creating that supply and demand, roller coaster that you see around the world. But now, as you've heard, a lot of people have heard, data is the new oil. Data is the new oil, right? So then when you have something, I mean, technology has been a player for a long time. Digital world, you look at your NASDAQ today, look at your stock exchange today, where the leading companies, and they're really data companies, right? Your Microsoft, your NVIDIAs are driving that through data. So now data changes or I don't know if it challenges the petrodollar, changes the petrodollar, becomes the new petrodollar. I don't know. What does that look like?
Well, Grant, let's come back to basics on it, right? Absolutely, data is very valuable. We're seeing that especially in AI, because AI requires a lot of data, right? So we see that, right? And we also see that this is where there's a lot of investment right now, billions of dollars, literally, right? And we've gone over that in previous shows, right? But what we forget is that data isn't the new oil, because data still needs oil. It needs oil for electric consumption.
Get down to the fundamentals of physical life, right? It's still, exactly. You got it.
Exactly. So now, what's very interesting is, for instance, you've got Amazon, and you've got Elon Musk, and they're all looking on how they can put data centers into space, right? And by doing that, of course, it changes the dynamics of a lot of things. But one thing it does is that data center is no longer dependent on oil.
Yeah, I like to see how it would work and transmit and change. But you see where this is going, and you got a great point. So once it's no longer dependent on the petrol system, the petrodollar, then it becomes a different.
Keep in mind one thing, you've got to build these satellites. You got to build these floating platforms, let's say, for data centers up in space. Okay, you can't make the products to build them without oil.
Yeah.
First of all, plastics in general, oil-based, right? Second, to do metal, I mean, you need to be able to melt at high heat temperatures. The only place you're going to get that from is consumption of oil in different forms. Right?
Unless we find another way. I've always been intrigued. This is my personal philosophy, right? That I understand, like, we've been, I would say, dependent on oil because of the manufacturing economy that started in the 19th century, that type of thing. And we said, hey, in order, so we built our technology, let's say, around the use of oil. That's how I got our locomotives working and things of that nature, our economy, our cars, our systems. But we live in a world or a universe of absolute energy. I mean, energy should not be scarce. We live in a world, it's just, there's an abundance of energy. We just don't tap into it very, very well. I mean, the world rotates 24 hours a day, and they got nothing to do with mankind, right? The sun comes up, it beams its energy constantly, and it ain't gonna run out anytime soon. Yeah, we don't really tap into it too well. And I'm not sure where that's going.
Well, that's the point. There's two things. One is, is harnessing energy, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, and you just talked about the Industrial Revolution, right? When the Industrial Revolution started, keep in mind that the power was steam, And steam was produced by putting wood or coal underneath a boiler and creating steam.
Yeah.
Locomotives, you talked about trains, originally were all steam. It's only later on that we had diesel locomotives and electric locomotives, right?
Yeah.
So we actually were producing energy. The issue was that when you use oil, right, it's much more economical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's easier to transport. Can you imagine that you have I don't know some big data center and you're powering it from steam? You know, I mean,
No, it's not efficient. Not very. That's the thing. The efficiency of utilizing these a technology has to be there, and that's where we're kind of running into now. How many data centers are going to be? Are we really, affecting the Earth? Geography, things like. We got to go to a quick break. We're going to come back because this is interesting. A lot of people are tuning into this because this is kind of. I think we're at that brink of a change from that petrol system and see what that's going to look like. We'll see what Chris has to say.
Great.
In today's fast-paced financial landscape, access to capital is the key to success. At the heart of this revolution is Case Capital Markets, powered by SETI Case. Here, innovation and investment converge, creating a dynamic environment where businesses can thrive and reach new heights. Introducing Grant McGaugh, the senior advisor at Case Capital Markets. Grant is a visionary leader, dedicated to connecting businesses with institutional capital and strategic funding. His expertise opens doors to game-changing investment opportunities, making him an invaluable partner for companies looking to scale and succeed in the competitive world of finance. With an impressive 25 years in technology, 9 years in healthcare, and 6 years in investment banking, Grant McGaugh has a proven track record. He has successfully closed over $500 million in high-value transactions, seamlessly bridging technology, healthcare, and infrastructure with innovative financial solutions. His experience is a testament to his ability to drive success. Case Capital Markets offers businesses direct access to over 32,000 venture capital firms, private equity funds, family offices, and institutional investors. This network empowers mid-market companies with under $100 million in revenue to scale beyond their limits, unlocking unprecedented growth potential. Debt, equity, growth capital, public offerings. These are the building blocks of the future of capital access. Whether you're scaling a business, seeking investment, or exploring market expansion, Grant McGaugh is your trusted partner. Together, you can unlock capital and create long-term financial success. The future belongs to those who take action. Are you ready to elevate your business?
All right. If everybody's been following us, we're talking about petrodollars, the petrodollar system as it is today, before the beginning, the origin story, where it's at now, and where could it look like even in the future. And we're getting down to, we just left for break, and we were just talking about some of the bigger threats to the petrodollar system today. Is it de-dollarization? Is it the BRICS, or China, or digital currencies, as we just talked about, or shifting energy markets? And I know I got Chris's attention because he was ready to just go in there. So, Chris, what you got to say?
Well, Grant, it's a tremendously interesting topic, but again, it's one that most Americans don't really care about because
I don't care.
It doesn't really affect our daily life except for, again, the impact of the price at the pump, right? But, okay, if we go back a little bit, is keep in mind that OPEC started off in 1960 with 13 countries. There's 13 members of OPEC. The U.S. has never been part of OPEC. That's one thing that we need people to understand clearly. And the U.S. hasn't been part of OPEC for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is that we have private oil companies. In OPEC, those are governments that control their oil production and supply. Mm-hmm. Okay? But we believe in the private market, and the U.S. government doesn't. It stores the strategic reserve, as they call it, of oil, but it doesn't produce or manufacture or control production or supply of it, mm-hmm. right? And then, when you fast forward to 2016, that was when what's called, OPEC Plus started. Okay. And what happened is OPEC opened the doors and allowed some other countries to come in and participate. So it's very interesting if you look at the countries that are not part of OPEC also, okay, because that's a determining factor. So in OPEC, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Kuwait, you have the United Arab Emirates, you have Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, right, and a few others, okay? Who's not in OPEC? Mm-hmm. The number 2 oil producer, which is Russia. Mm. Mexico is not in OPEC, right? Mm. Even the Middle East countries, Bahrain and Oman, are not part of OPEC, right? I think that might surprise a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see how it's kind of interesting. So you kind of have these two worlds. And in the non-OPEC world, right, they are looking to sell primarily in dollars, of course, because it's the most convertible, most liquid, safest currency out there. But they will accept other currencies. Mm-hmm. Okay, and now as we're hearing about Mexico supplying oil to Cuba and with their crisis that's going on, Mexico is accepting other currencies.
Yeah, you got a lot going on in that whole world. And you're saying, Americans don't care, but I think they do. They just don't understand the underpinning because they do care, like you just said, when they go to the pump. Or they care when they go to the grocery line and they see that, wow, I paid $50 for the same thing and now it's $70, so to speak, for the inflationary war. So it starts to hit home at that point. And to another thing that you just mentioned, which I didn't realize, that the price of oil is almost double in other countries. Like that changes their economies, I'm sure, by a lot. They probably
price at the pump.
Price at the pump.
Yeah.
Price at the pump. So price at the pump, I think, is something that you really want to pay attention to, understanding how the petrodollar works, why our interest, why are we so interested, in the Middle East? Why are we so invested, in that part of the world when there's other things going on? We're almost in this world where we want to, just be, run our own economy without a lot of influence or other detractors, but we're connected. We are in a symbiotic relationship. What you just said, where they're backing their oil production in the U.S. dollars, and then they're putting that back into a U.S. Treasury. Well, that's enriching the nation. I mean, Absolutely. You can't get away from that.
Yeah, Grant, there's a couple of things. First, I will tell you that, yes, everyone is concerned today, and the media is talking inflation, prices, and all this. Everyone's concerned until they get used to that price. Mm. Then you
I never got used to $4. I like 30 cents. I never got used to that.
Well, in fairness, $4 you're going to have to get used to. 30 cents you will probably never used to.
I'll never get it again, right?
But look, we've had this a few. I don't remember how many years ago. Oil prices, gas prices went up to the pump to about the level they are right now. Okay, it's not that this is new. We've had this level of pricing before. right? And they came down and they stabilized. You know, anytime the price stabilizes and people accommodate that based on their income and what they buy and everything, it doesn't become an issue anymore. You know,
Right.
and that's kind of, you know, what we're going to see happen here also. And I don't believe oil is going to stay at the price it is. Although, you know, my pet aggravation with it is that the gas in the gas station is not the price that they're charging us at the pump. Right?
Yeah, it's speculation, or they can raise the price, you know, whether they're in a pinch or not.
Me, there's one word, and it's price gouging, right?
Thank you.
But they're doing it, you know, in kind of a quiet way, right? And they have a great reason. That's the main thing. When you want to price gouge, you need a great reason, right? Now, what we're going to, and if you're watching the price per barrel of crude oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has come down. It's under $100 a barrel now.
Okay.
Did you see the price at the pump come down? It was amazing.
No, I'm not seeing that. Like, no, they got other things. You know, it's
because now what they say is, oh, well, the price has come down. It will take a while before that price gets to the pump. But when the price goes up, it's at the pump the next day.
So, you know, it's the little guy that gets squeezed over and over again. No matter what, it's the person that has to pay that price at the pump. You don't have the controls. You're not turning on and off the spigot, right? You're just at the other side of that, and somebody else is turning it on. You have to depend on somebody else's morality, their ethics, their reason, their you know, what's pressuring them today. I don't know, but they said, well, we can get away with this, so we do. But I think there's always a check and a balance at some point in time. We'll see what that all looks like. But this is how the world economy is propped up. Petrodollars. It really got my attention on how our economies of scale are maintained, you know, constantly. And oil, to your point, is like, and you said a word that I don't think I even realized. It is the world's, from a commodity perspective, it is the largest commodity that's traded. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
The number one traded commodity in the world based on value.
Based on value. More than gold, more than electricity, more than food, right? Food.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to remember, it's not fair to say food because food is not a commodity. Individual items are, right? You know, corn is a commodity, right?
Okay.
Soybeans are a commodity. Okay. But not all food is a commodity.
Right. Okay. This is how you want to tomato that, right?
Yeah. But Greg, to me, this comes back to a bigger thing you and I have talked about before, which is these, to me, are more mechanisms on making sure that people go to work. Right?
Gotta go to work.
Gotta go to work. Okay?
Yeah.
And we got to go to work, especially not for the things we need, but for the things we want.
Yeah, or the things they put in front of you to want, right? Or creating, you know, that cyclical awareness. Like I said, you got to put you in debt, because if you're not in debt, you're not really participating in the financial system the way I would like you to, right?
Exactly. That, and I think that rings true everywhere, and, you know, especially here.
Maybe that's the reason, Chris. Maybe I think we just answered our own question. Like, why is that price at the pump? Why doesn't it reflect? He said, because I need you to go to work. I can't do that. You wouldn't go to work.
To me, this is like the underlining foundation of the financial system. How do we make sure people go to work? You know, and that goes hand in hand with, we need them to want things they don't even know they want. So that
we got to make sure Chris goes to work. He has too much leisure time. No, he needs to go to work. He needs to have some sweat equity into the.
It's not sweat equity. It's not. He doesn't need sweat equity. He needs debt. He needs debt. Transferable
debt. I hope. Is it transferable?
But believe me, I don't want your debt.
Hey, you know, that's crazy.
I don't want to
go to another quick break, Chris, and then we're going to wrap this up, because this is, again, it's very, very interesting around these petrodollars, these agreements that go on between countries. And this, again, it's been going on for 50 years. It's not, it wasn't just last week. It's been going on for a long time. But it when you start to see the underpinnings of why things happen, certain wars are happening or skirmishes. You talk about Venezuela, why Venezuela? There's despots all over the world, but we're going to pick on this guy because, he's sitting on a little oil, right? And some other things. So we'll talk about these things when we come back.
Follow the Brand TV broadcast host, Grant McGaugh, as he visits with top executives and entrepreneurs to find out their secrets of success with their personal brand. Follow the Brand TV broadcast host as he focuses on brand development to build better relationships, bring value to your business, relationships, and career. You will enjoy listening to each episode that is tailored to speak to you directly. If you're looking for this type of clarity in terms of building your brand, you have tuned into the right station. Each episode will help you to shape a conversation in the 5-star BDM network of 20,000 professionals and become a springboard for your corporate engagement and business opportunities. Each guest will frame their story in the areas of personal branding, business development, career development, financial empowerment, and technology innovation. Grant McGaugh explains why he is the CEO and owner of his own professional career. Grant is an accomplished business leader and entrepreneur who wants to give back to individuals to grow their personal brand strategy. Tune in as he weaves his story about new possibilities, while to you exceed expectations. If you love storytelling, this show will make for fun.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, rtv.network.
Hey, welcome back to the Big Picture with Grant McGaugh. I'm the CEO of 5-Star BDM, and I am joined by Chris, the money magnet Principe. He is the principal owner of Financial IT. He's been sharing his knowledge, his wisdom, his experience with us, talking about the petrodollar. And Chris, we got one final question. I got to understand this because looking ahead, is this petrodollar system declining? Is it evolving? Or is it simply being misunderstood by the public?
Well, Grant, let's start off with a little summary, right? So, the petrodollar and the underlying things, these are financial mechanisms, right, that have done a few things. They look to achieve global political stability, right? They look to secure the dollar's global dominance, and they look to ensure stable flows of oil and provide the U.S. financial power by having excess funds reinvested into U.S. financial instruments, primarily treasury bonds, right? So that's kind of the summary. And it's a system that, as we've seen, has worked well for a lot of years, right? And that will continue, okay? It'll continue because right now it's in everyone's best interest. Now, do we have some breakage from that system, let's say? Well, yeah, you have the BRICS country, which are, Brazil, South Africa, Russia, China, right? So and India. So you have them, and they're doing trading and they're buying and selling things on their own, but it's not to the extent or to the size or the magnitude of the global trade economy, right? Mm-hmm. The dollar still dominates 60-70% of all global trade, maybe more. Now what's interesting is, let's talk about going forward a little bit, right? So if we look at going forward, we see that the movement of money is changing, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're less dependent, let's say, on the banks and that international finance structure that's been in place, and we're now embracing some new things, primarily stable coins. Mm-hmm. Okay, and stable coins have a lot of advantages, and we've gone over that, and we will continue to, as it's to me constantly a breaking and uplifting story, the stable coins. But it gives countries a chance to buy stable coins, to use that for purchases, mm-hmm. and we're going to see that it will move into the oil space. But keep in mind that the bulk of stable coins are backed by U.S. dollars.
Yes.
And the companies that issue these stable coins back that money back into U.S. treasuries and bonds and treasury notes, primarily treasury notes, which are a little bit different because treasury notes are short-term and liquid. They trade like cash. Okay? Bonds are a little longer term and they trade, but they don't trade as quickly as cash, right? So the U.S. and kind of unintentionally, I would say, I wouldn't say that this was a government intention that stable coins would come out and come up, right? Unlike the Petrodollar, which was our government making different arrangements, okay? Because there's no Petrodollar treaty, right? It's arrangements, it's understandings, it's market practices, and our government years ago did a very good job on that. I don't think that they knew, saw, or understand the stablecoin but the stablecoin market understands that the U.S. dollar is still the most liquid and most stable currency. So that's why we're seeing well over 90% of all stablecoins backed by U.S. dollar.
I got a question, if you don't mind, Chris, to break into that thought, because there's one thing that during this whole discussion is still kind of like I still have questions about, and that is, why would a Middle Eastern oil exporting nation historically been willing to reinvest their dollar surpluses back into a foreign country in the United States with a different ideology or religious standpoint than their own? But they do this. Why would they do that?
Well, Grant, there's really just one word, and it's the basis of the whole financial system. It's risk. Okay?
R-I-S-K, risk.
Yes,
Less risk.
Less risk. Okay, now keep in mind, the other side of these agreements, arrangements, different understandings, market practices, right? All of those things that are in place are also based on the fact that there is promises from the U.S. to supply military equipment and other things, to supply support, to supply security guarantees to these oil producers, right?
Is that why Trump got a plane? Is that
well, the country of Qatar sent him a plane, yeah. So.
and they get a military envoy or something. I mean, there's got to be some more there, right?
Yeah, and I mean, keep in mind though, Putin gifted North Korea with a beautiful luxury, bulletproof, bomb-proof limousine. Okay, so
you gotta have those things.
Gotta have those. You know?
Everybody should have one.
Well, by the way, here in the U.S., there's a lot of companies that you can send your Mercedes to, and they will bullet and bomb-proof it for you.
I gotta get one.
I know of one company, and they had a guy who sent his 1969 Chevy Impala to get bulletproof and bomb-proof, and he's from Texas, and he had a big set of longhorn horns on the front of the car.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I have to admit, though, I hope I ever don't need to have a bulletproof vehicle just to drive around. I mean, what's really happening? But okay, now you've answered the question.
Also, let me give you another little side point, right? Down in Georgetown, Guyana.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s and 90s, the mayor of Georgetown was a guy named Hamilton Green, who used to get chauffeured around in a bulletproof, bomb-proof Jaguar sedan.
Well, good. Yeah. In those days, I see you probably needed it,
Well, but you've been to Guyana, you know the situation there. I just thought
that
little historical.
There, how big is your enemy? How equipped are they? So, but you kind of answer that. So the reason why is the risk, and there is a military exchange. Even though we've had wars in Iraq, we've had wars in Iran, but you know what? We've never had any type of war in Saudi Arabia, right?
Well, and Grant, also keep in mind that globally, the two biggest holders of U.S. financial instruments outside of the U.S. are China and Japan. So why would China, if they want to de-dollarize, be one of the number one buyers? They've been number one for years. Japan comes up, they come up. Been one of the number one buyers of U.S. Treasury bonds and U.S. debt because of that same word, risk.
Yeah.
Safe investment.
Man, risk. Wow. Lower the risk. And really what you mean is stability. It's stable, right? So there's less opportunity. Like I said, we don't necessarily like to run around and bulletproof because it's stable for the most part.
And there's another part to it, Grant. The other part is, okay, let's say that we have a disagreement with China, and let's say that even there's a war, right?
Yeah.
Well, what happens to all that Chinese ownership of U.S. debt?
Yeah. What does happen to it? Does it go away?
Do you think the U.S. will still pay the interest on them?
No. Yeah, right. Of course. Of course not. Yeah. There's a loss
That's
there.
the other side of risk. That's right. And again, all these different things, kind of weave themselves together to put financial security and a stabilization globally, politically, worldwide.
Wow, that's interesting. No, the one word you did not mention, we went through this whole thing. We've mentioned a lot of different, countries, especially in the Middle East. We've talked about Russia. We've talked about China. We've talked about Brazil. We talked about Mexico. You did not mention one word about Europe. I didn't hear anything about France. I didn't hear anything about England. I didn't hear anything about Germany. I didn't hear anything about what you call the NATO nations.
Well, Grant, I did make one small mention, which is to say that in Europe, the price at the pump is double what we pay here. Okay.
Okay. Fair enough.
You need to know anything else?
Fair enough. But they have their own block. The EU has its own thing, and what they're doing. That's interesting. I always thought that the English pound and what they were doing, Brexit and thing. I mean, at one point they were the world's economic engine.
Oh yeah.
Maybe I don't know, when did that change? Maybe after World War II. Maybe that's when they that kind of like America now is the de facto leader of the world.
Well, look, after World War II, Great Britain was financially destroyed, basically. I mean, their system, and this is why, and you remember the old statement, the sun never sets on the British Empire, right?
Yeah.
This is why after World War II, you have so many countries that were colonies that got their independence, right?
Right, a lot of them.
Yeah, and they got their independence because Great Britain couldn't afford them anymore.
Man, we got to know these things. You didn't know real history, right? That's hey. We got to wrap up now. We're going to come back next week. You got to keep tuning in to the big picture because we talk about the big financial changes, the big technologies, the discussions that you don't get on mainstream television, and what was really going on. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion on the petrodollars. And again, Chris, we're going to be seeing you next week, right?
Well, Grant, great topic. Thank you very much. And we will see you next week.
All right. You take care of yourself.
All the best.
All right. Bye.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel, our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, rtv.network.